All right. Hello and welcome, Sean, and welcome listeners and viewers to the Conscious Entrepreneur Podcast. Our special guest today that I'm really excited to introduce is Sean Orr. I will probably not be able to introduce him with the same power that he fully deserves, but what I will say is that he's an absolute expert at neurologist, like a scientist for the brain and beyond, who's doing some incredible work. And the subject of today is the neuroeconomy, surviving the transition into the neuroeconomy. And it's really fascinating. And if you're just curious and confused by that term and what it means, welcome to the club, because so am I. And I'm going to learn. You're here to learn and to meet Sean. So thank you, Sean, for being here. And please correct me with my introduction and tell us who you are, what you do for people.
Well, thank you very much, Miro, for having me on. It's really an honor, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about this today. I think it's just an extension of a great conversation that we started a couple of weeks ago, is the way I look at it. I'm a neurologist, so I'm a medical doctor, and I take care of people who have suffered various forms of injury to the brain and the spinal cord and nervous system. And for 20 years I've been practicing now. And I've learned along the way to take the strategies that we use to rescue somebody who's had a brain injury and apply them to people who have healthy brains in order to enhance their capabilities, extend their cognitive capacity. So
Yeah.
That's kind of it in a nutshell.
Exciting. So let's dive right in, right? So when you say extending cognitive abilities, like what are we talking about? What does it look like? What kind of performance increases can people expect that typically work with you? And who do you typically work with?
Well, so I work with all sorts of people. I really lump my practice into two groups. One is people who are really trying to solve a problem because their cognition has been degraded, so their performance is worse. Somehow they're just not performing up to snuff. And then another group of people who are actually really doing a great job. They're at peak, or they want to arrive at that peak performance where they're in flow state more often. And they're just worried that they might burn out and lose what they have, and they don't want that, or they want to continue to grow and expand even further.
Yeah.
So, that makes
I'm
sense.
definitely in the category of wanting to grow and expand further, even though I'm sure like my memory could improve and so such things. So let's talk a little bit about the challenges and the potential and the possibilities that we have right now, and perhaps as it relates to the neuroeconomy, which is this new term that I'm just now becoming familiar with.
Sure. So I think actually the challenges are a good place to start, because that's easy. That's what all of us are dealing with on a daily basis, right? Anybody who's in the marketplace and working right now knows that they're being held to a higher standard than ever for productivity, for showing up with either developing or creating new resources, or developing and sourcing new clients. And the kind of level that you have to aspire to can be just absolutely exhausting. And so we're seeing record numbers of burnout in people who are ambitious of any sort, right?
Yeah.
And so, and that burnout manifests in a lot of different ways. It can just be exhaustion, damaged relationships, loss of income opportunity, deals that don't go through because people are making mistakes, cognitive errors. All you need to do is open up a newspaper, for those who still get the newspaper, or even just look online and see the headlines. It's full of ways that people make mistakes that trip themselves up.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
So that's nothing new. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry to cut you off. That's nothing new. But what's really changed is that the stakes are different. So we live in this kind of exponential time where the things that we do right can be ramped up faster than ever, and so can the things that we do wrong, right?
Yeah. One of my mentors, what he says is, if your self is messed up and you scale your business, you're just going to have a bigger messed up business and a bigger mess, right?
Right.
So I think it's fundamentally important. This is what I do with my clients, working on ourselves in all of these ways, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and then the strategy and support that they need to get to the next level. And if we don't do that, there's no strategy that is foolproof. We're only as good as the operating machine that we have, right? So that makes absolute sense. And I also too want to call out like the burnout. I've been there too, and I think a lot of our viewers have been there in a place where too many tabs open, right? Like too many things at the same time that are running, too many challenges and external sort of pressures that can drive people really crazy. I've had that experience where I was working in corporate, 2017, and I just like was more and more pressures building up, and then at some point, burnout happens. And it can be incredibly difficult and expensive and costly to recover from.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that with kind of the work that you're doing, I'd like to learn more about what are the ways that you can sort of prevent that from happening. What are the methods that you implement that help people with this?
Well, that's really great that you've been through burnout. So congratulations. Now I'm looking at that as a badge of honor.
Really?
The thing is, I think burnout is a hallmark of working in what I call the cardio economy. Maybe this is a good idea to kind of discuss this topic of how we're going through this massive transition, and then we can talk about strategies.
Absolutely.
So for all of human history, we have lived in a cardio economy, right? For the most part, most people alive have made their living based on how much they can lift and move and transport. So whether you're working in the fields in an agrarian society or whether you're working in an industrial society, it's about getting raw materials into production and then making something. But that takes horsepower at the end of the day. And even the people who are the captains of industry were working in a cardio economy, laboring, or leveraging the force of labor, getting the people that work for them to do all this heavy lifting and moving. But now, as of about 2012, more than half of the world's population is taking advantage of this big global brain that we have called the internet. And you can run a whole business from your chair and you don't have to lift a finger. And so we're living in this kind of time now where the cognitive revolution has really taken place. That started back in the 1950s, and now it's flourishing. It's just going exponential. So I believe that we've now arrived in what we call a neuroeconomy, where more than half of the world's population is making their money off of leveraged technology. And this is why you see people able to scale up. Elon Musk is kind of the hallmark neuroeconomy worker right now. He's got companies. He's able to maintain this kind of balance. As challenging as it is, he's still able to do it because he's leveraging the cognitive work of the people that he's associated with. So that all makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. So that I'm just intrigued by this, right? I think Elon Musk is someone that a lot of entrepreneurs and myself admire for his ability to create, not just have amazing ideas, but in turning them into real things that we can actually use. So what are some of the ways, and I think this was fascinating because you mentioned, the technology and the fusing really, right? How we're integrating with our technology so much that wasn't really possible before. So what are some of the methods, again, like how are we doing this? Like how do I become more of an Elon Musk, right? Or anybody watching right now? How can they become more of this, extended cyborg that uses machine learning and all these skills that you've mastered and integrating them with our brain in a way that we can create better things and have more impact?
So, I think the very first step is awareness, knowing that burnout is a hallmark of trying to continue working in the cardio economy. So if you're trying to do more with less and it's not working and you're just not able to find the time to rest and recuperate and you're burning out, it's probably because you're working uphill. You're still laboring in the cardio economy and it's time to make some changes. And those changes then all ought to be centered around optimizing the function of your brain. So this is where I think being aware of how brain structure and function, work is critical. It's exciting for me, because now, as a neurologist, I started as, in my training when neurology was not cool at all. It was like to go into, but I had this vision for where things were going in the future. And finally, neuroscience is sexy. Everybody's a neuroscientist. I'm challenged.
Yeah, biohacking is a big subject. It's so good because you're basically were into the brain before it was cool.
Yeah, I was they say, I was in country before country was cool. It's the same kind of thing here. And, So now most people understand what the amygdala is, what dopamine is. The tricky part is putting it all together. So what I like to do with my clients is help them to understand that we've got this big emotional brain, and 95% of our brain is the emotional brain. And then the logic circuits up in the frontal lobes make up only 5% of our brain volume, but they take up 20% of our brain energy. So again, kind of understanding that burnout occurs when you're overusing the brain, overusing the frontal lobes especially, and that they can get exhausted. And when they do, they go offline, and what do? We default back to the emotions. And the emotions are what they are, right? That's where we get into trouble. The mistakes we make, or we impulsively say something that crosses a line at work, or we make an impulsive move that's just not the right thing, or we're just not disciplined. That's because we're living out of our limbic system, or the 95% of our brain that's the emotional brain.
Absolutely, and I coach mindset as well, and so that's the thing, right? We can use our conscious mind as the goal setter, but then the unconscious mind is the goal setter, a goal getter, right? And that absolutely resonates. So again, I'm curious, I'm activated. Tell me more. Like, how do we? What are some practical ways that we can, in our daily lives, transition from the cardio economy, where people are basically running into burnout and having these cycles, into more of a neuroeconomy, where we effectively use our little frontal lobe and effectively use both our logical and emotional brain, and effectively integrate with our technology. Like, what are some of the more hands-on practical things people can do?
Great. Well, so you're in a very good space because you're coaching in this area. So I really applaud you, and I think that it's people like you that are going to make a big difference for everybody who's making this transition. So practical steps, first of all, again, being mindful, right? So you hear a lot about mindfulness right now, but it's going to become absolutely critical that we're mindful of our attention, where we put our attention, who we give it to. That's our most critical, important commodity moving forward in the neuroeconomy. Our attention is easily wiped out. That is essentially the hallmark of the frontal lobe function, is where we to put our attention and then how we process what it is that we're putting our attention on. So I like to break down, to get it really practical now, I've created what's called the Biohacker Blueprint along with Stephen Taroni, who's the co-creator of this program. And in the blueprint, we help people to understand that there are 3 levels of activities or strategies that you can engage in that help you to become optimized. All right, so your fundamental baseline level is all about how you live your life on a daily basis. It's lifestyle strategies. And then the second level is conditioning strategies that help to make you stronger and more resilient. And then your third level is more elite strategies. And that's where we start to get into things like medications, medical devices that actually help to jack up frontal lobe function, if you will. So they're all 3 different layers. And then in each layer, we divide each layer into 3 different domains. There's your nutrition, and then your activity, and then your recovery. So think about how we live life on a daily basis. We break our lives into those 3 areas. We got to eat, right? The food is what gives us the fuel for our actions and activity. And then while we're engaged in activity, we're going to be creating breakdown products of what we call oxidative metabolism. As we're thinking and doing things, it's very energy intensive for our brain, and we're creating debris that builds up in the brain that has to be disposed of. And then that's where recovery comes into play. So you got to dedicate part of your day every day to those 3 different domains. And if you do it on 3 different levels, by the time you've really got yourself organized and disciplined, now you have a blueprint where you can start to follow day by day how you're doing, tracking your results, and seeing where you can actually insert new strategies. So we categorize strategies based on where they fit into this rubric, if you will.
Powerful. So let me make sure I capture that for our listeners too. So it's active, being active, and then it's nutrition, right? So the fuel, right? Putting it in, putting it out, and then recovery. And essentially, in sort of the lifestyle set of your process, that's where we would look at each of those to optimize each of these areas, right?
Correct.
Cool. So that's fascinating. I'm just spent some time talking with another coach who is a marathon runner. She's running a marathon today. And yesterday she was telling me, hey, I'm gonna have to get off the call because I need to go to bed early, right? And she helps people with straight sleep. Like that's her thing. Like she helps people with sleep specifically. And a lot of people, she said, struggling, with sleeping correctly. And it has everything to do with what you said, the activity that I'm putting out during the day, physically, right? And then also when it comes to nutrition, I've learned recently through my own process that, truly, the way we eat totally affects the way we sleep too. Like if we have this huge meals, our recovery time sleeping is going to be, more spent digesting food than, anything else. So I just learned, with the little knowledge that I've learned about the subject you're talking about, I've seen profound effects on my energy, my cognitive ability, using things like intermittent fasting here and there. I don't know if you recommend those things, but just like becoming aware of how our sleep and our activity affects us, and being really mindful of the active recovery. I think recovery is, for a lot of us right now, I can only call myself out. Recovery is kind of something that just like happens, not something that we're intentional about. So,
well, when I was going through medical training in my fellowship years, I might have gotten something like 4 hours of sleep a night on average, on a good night. Right, so I used to have that attitude that there's going to be time to sleep when I die, and I'll motor through, very kind of a bullheaded approach, and that's a very old-fashioned way of doing things. Recovery is critical. Sleep or meditation is when we clear out that debris from our brain. I'll just take a parenthesis here. It was about 4 years ago that we finally discovered that the brain actually has a lymphatic drainage system. Like for 2,000 years, we thought that the brain did not have its own lymphatic drainage system, but we finally discovered it, and we discovered it on an MRI imaging study. And it turns out that it only turns on when we're asleep. So our brain has enough energy to either be engaged in activity and thinking, or during sleep to be removing the waste products that accumulate during the day, but not both at the same time. So it's really critical, and I think that your friend who's a coach is really onto something. And so, you can have perfect diet and perfect exercise, but if you're not getting sleep, you're not going to get fit. It's that basic. So integrating all of that into a holistic approach is really what I'm very interested in for my clients, and I often will actually help to coach coaches so that they can understand where their particular piece fits into that whole blueprint, and why what they're doing is so critical, and how they all these parts fit together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a lot of my, friends and people in this group are, sort of on the spiritual side of things, right? And now we're in this amazing time of our lives where the world is realizing that, there's not either or, right? It's like the same sort of things that we're discussing, what we talked about, where attention goes, and that's been, a focus of sort of the spiritual practice for, thousands of years. And now, and I know you're aware of all this, it's, kind of all coming together. And I think it's fascinating you talk about meditation, how we can use that to clear out the debris in our minds. And I think it's just underpinning that. But even though, some people who are more on a spiritually inclined and practicing some of these, having that sort of scientific backbone, like here's actually what happens in your brain in this process, that's just going to help everyone be able better to communicate why it's important what we're doing, and be able to make those choices more consistently as opposed to somewhat sporadically. So incredibly valuable. So that's the blueprint, right? Tell me more about the blueprint. Is this something that we can get access to, like if we were to get involved with that? What would that look like?
Yeah, thank you. So I think there are a few ways into it, and I would just kind of reinforce the idea that, from a spiritual perspective, this is a very exciting time, and I don't want to ever impose my personal beliefs. I do feel like we're going to come to a day not long from now when we'll realize what the neurological substrate is for spirituality, and how we are actually connected, from a wetware perspective to a different realm. This is not a new concept at all, but I feel like we're on the cusp of discovering the actual mechanism of how that happens. And so when you think about sustaining productivity in the neuroeconomy, and one of the messages that I really love that you're putting out there is the wisdom part of it. It's one thing to know what to do. It's another thing to know why and whether we should do that thing or not, and whether it supports kind of a more enlightened world. So if we're going to sustain productivity in the neuroeconomy and we adopt, these practices that help us to become more whole human beings, I feel like that's going to benefit the world. So what we've done, to answer your question, in terms of the biohacker blueprint, there are really many different ways into this. What we've, Stephen Ferroni and I, anybody who's interested, if you just navigate to biohackerblueprint.com, you'll find access to our 6-week-long program where we go really into depth on the fast start. In other words, how does somebody get involved with biohacking? What is it? And how do you leverage it so that you can become that holistic, integrated person from many different angles? And where we found that, there are some people that are very motivated and they'll go right into that program and they're getting a lot out of it. Other people are interested in only just one aspect of it. Take intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting, we've known for thousands of years that fasting is good for us, but it's only been over the last couple of years that we've understood why and how through the process of autophagy and anti-fragility, if you will. Making what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So what Stephen and I have created is a detox program. And I'll just say here, I've never been a fan of that concept of detox. As a doctor, I've thought it sounded kind of marginal. But as we put our heads together and realized, the number of toxins in our environment, there are millions of chemicals floating out there that we don't have any control over, getting into our food supply, getting into our air, getting into our bodies. And what that does is it creates a soup of inflammation that degrades brain performance at the end of the day. And so being intentional about taking time to actually, focus on helping remove those toxins through strategies like intermittent fasting can be very helpful. So we've created actually a rapid 2-week-long challenge. If anybody's interested, you can go to biohackerdetox.com. And that's a really simple and easy way to get into biohacking and leverage, an understanding, get the brain science behind what intermittent fasting does, how to plug it into a regimen of detox, using the right kind of supplements and the right approach. And really what we do, that I like what I'm hearing from you, is that we help people understand that part of detoxification is physiological, getting your body to work better, but part of it is mindset. How do you marry those together? Getting a morning routine and an evening routine into place. And if I were to leave your viewers with 2 strategies, number 1 is get some routines into place to bookend your day. And number 2 is start learning to breathe better. You master those 2 things, that honestly, it's not quite full Pareto rule, right? Maybe that's only 50% of it. That's huge. So if you can get a good morning routine to prepare for the day, a good evening routine to prepare for your recovery phase, and then learn strategically to breathe. Wim Hof has done a lot to popularize this. Breathing connects you, and I'm sure you talk about this with your clients all the time in terms of connecting with yourself, being aware. Breathing is the best way to do that in the moment's notice, right? In the battle.
Wow. So even anyone listening right now, if they're having, a slump in their day, we can just kind of check in with our breathing. How am I breathing right now? And change the just breathing patterns. It should give us, we can create results pretty immediately, right? I've noticed this too. Like if we, anyone listening right now, if you go look into a room, people having a conversation, people are having a tendency to actually hold their breath, and it's for what reason? So becoming aware of that is extremely powerful. Everything you're sharing here, Sean, is absolutely resonates, and I can see how that's really, really effective.
Yeah, it's really neat stuff, and I can see it happen real time. So if I have a patient who is connected to a brainwave monitoring device that also looks at brain blood flow, and they're in that breath-holding state that's full of anxiety, right? That kind of constrained, closed posture where they're feeling restricted and anxious, and we tell them to go ahead and now take some deep breaths and get into that routine of just allowing everything to relax. It's absolutely amazing to see how blood flow to the frontal lobes turns on. And that's so critical, because if you're somebody who is making a living off of being creative, innovative, disruptive in a creative way, if you're looking for new solutions to old problems, if you're trying to disrupt an industry, if you're trying to maintain sustained attention, use good judgment, good insight, good wisdom. All of that comes from your lateral prefrontal cortex here. So a really great hack to just turn all of that on is to get into that open position, allow your arms to come back, take a deep breath, and just let everything drain out through your feet.
Mm.
And so, yogis have been teaching this to us, for thousands of years. But now we have the scientific evidence to be able to show how it works, and we can actually connect people through biofeedback and help them to understand that connection in a way that's real, that's palpable and practical.
That's incredible, man. Really appreciate that, Sean. This reminds me a lot of the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, right? Who's bringing the spiritual kind of world and energy world together with the science, and it's just like you've nailed it. Just becoming aware of the breath and using that, activating our brain and how it's all connected. So incredibly grateful for you for sharing this wisdom with us. So I think if all we did is create the bookends of our days, establish those morning routines and nighttime routines, and start breathing correctly, that's something that could help us all sort of immediately have better results in our lives. This is the same thing that I'm teaching my clients. Absolutely, like it's so powerful. And then to take it sort of further, and people who want some more help and receive some more support, perhaps a more personalized approach. Like, that was one of the questions I had for you. Have you found in your work that sort of the same things work for people the same, or that different people need different approaches to be effective? And if so, how do you support people that need more of a personalized approach?
Yeah, that's a great question, Miro. I appreciate it. So, where those strategies, the morning, evening routines, and the breathing will get you 50% of the way, that's easy. Then we can get you to 95% of the way using personalized strategies, and that's to me really where my biggest interest lays. So, sorry about that interruption.
You're good.
Gotta love technology, man. When it works, it's great. When it backfires, no fun. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on airplane mode, which I should have done already. So, focus and concentration on a personal level then becomes a matter of what are your individual characteristics that make you different, right? So I may have those clients that come and say, look, I've done all this. I've done the morning routine. I've done the evening routine. I deep breathe. I can't perform right. I'm burning out. I just don't have any tolerance for interruptions anymore. The client is the enemy. I'm sick and tired of showing up to work, et cetera, et cetera. So then we take a step back and say, okay, now what are your individual risk factors that you're dealing with? And it starts to verge on the medical, but it doesn't necessarily have to be full medical, right? So I'll start to ask, this is where we drill down on your habits. What are you doing in terms of allowing interruptions into your life, right? So how do you start to filter out and screen out those things that are distracting your attention? That was a good little example we just had. What are your individual genetic characteristics? And this is where maybe, the mainstream medical complex has really kind of failed patients, because we like to kind of beat people. Well, it used to be eat a low-fat diet and exercise and you're going to be fine. Well, that was such misguided information. So I may take somebody's genetic information and analyze their dopamine metabolism pathways.
Oh.
If you look at COMT, for example, catechol-methyltransferase is a gene that codes for a protein, and this transferase protein breaks down dopamine. And there are different kinds.
Hang on a second, Sean. I got to get clear on something. Are you saying that you actually have ability to look at your client's personal DNA to give them sort of personalized instruction on how to biohack their lives?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's incredible. I'm sorry. I just need to acknowledge that we're in this part of the future where this is possible, and that's incredible. So amazing. Continue. Sorry, I'm blown away.
No, it's great. It's fine. Well, I can give you a great example. I've got one patient, a client who is a speaker, right? So she's a national level speaker, and it's customary for her to stand in front of audiences of thousands of people. But recently she had found that when she did, she started having panic attacks, and that was not characteristic for her. So what we did is we went and looked at the kind of the first tier of problems, and we discovered that she had actually become very deficient in vitamin B12. And the result of that was that she was accumulating an amino acid in the bloodstream called homocysteine. So this is a double whammy because vitamin B12 is involved in 22 different biochemical processes in the brain and spinal cord. If you're deficient in it, your brain function starts to fail. And it's probably one of the most common reasons people become depressed and anxious and then develop dementia.
Wow.
And the homocysteine that was accumulating is toxic to neurons, to the brain cells, so she really had a double whammy. So we got her onto a regimen that was able to overcome her lack of ability to absorb the B12, got her tank back up, her homocysteine levels dropped, we were able to measure all of this. And that got her about 80% of the way, but there was still this residual kind of panic that she was feeling. So we did her genetic analysis, and we discovered that she was a slow metabolizer of dopamine. And so that means that she was accumulating an excess amount of dopamine. And so we then developed some body posture strategies that helped her to break down her dopamine just before she would go on stage. You know, Tony Robbins does this. I'm sure most of your viewers know who he is. You ever watch him prepare? He has a trampoline, and he'll go and jump on the trampoline and jog and box and do all this stuff before he goes on the stage to get him in the right state. So, you know, and that all works for somebody who's a slow metabolizer of dopamine. Somebody who's a rapid metabolizer of dopamine may need a different set of strategies, and we'll use natural substances like S-adenosylmethionine or 5-HU for those people to 5-HTP, to get them to boost their dopamine. So when they get on stage, they're focused and they can actually deliver the way that they're supposed to. And then you can detect it from genetic
testing. Okay, go ahead. I'm blown away. Like, this is great. So I just wanted to maybe clarify that there's two ways even that people, metabolize their dopamine, and that some of us are more like Tony Robbins, who need to jump up and down and do the sort of physical bit to get on stage, and then others, sounds like there's certain supplements that will help with that, or is that correct? And then how can we identify if I'm this person, should I prepare more like Tony or more like this other client that you work with?
You know, a lot of it is stuff that you can do on your own. And this is a very individual decision, obviously, because once you analyze your genetic material, it's there. But companies like 23andMe, for example, will give you a pretty cheap analysis, and then you can get access to your genetic information and do a deep dive. And you can actually go to, I think it's RSopedia. I'll have to look up the link and give it to you for your viewers. But there's Snipopedia. It's snpedia.com. So SNPs are single nucleotide polymorphisms, which are parts of genes that you can actually look up now in an encyclopedia online at snipedia.com. So you can actually do your own analysis and figure out, are you a fast or slow metabolizer? There's a lot more that goes into it in terms of sleep. Are you a fast metabolizer of adenosine? And so I'll do that on a custom basis for my clients. But there's a lot that you can do in an automated way too online. So,
yeah, fascinating. Sean, thank you so much. I think that's all the time that we have. I will definitely, right after this call, have a chat with you what it might look like for me personally, because I'm extremely intrigued. But I want to give you an opportunity. You've mentioned a couple of resources that we can guide our viewers to learn more about hacking themselves and their brain and expanding ourselves. I think you've mentioned some powerful things like, trigger moments when we feel like the client is the enemy, right? So if anyone's watching feeling like the world is happening to them and the client has become the enemy, there might be a signal that we could use some help, or perhaps just implement some of these things that we discussed today, so that it doesn't feel that way anymore. So extremely valuable information. What are some ways that you could guide our viewers before we wrap up?
Well, thank you, Miro. I appreciate that. So the fastest way to find me is just looking up online, seanormd.com. I'm in social media pretty heavily, so if you follow the links to Facebook, you'll find the content that I post. I'm always putting out new information about how brain functions and how it malfunctions and how to overcome it. So I'm on Twitter and just getting into Instagram, but pretty heavy on Facebook as well. And I think if anybody wants a rapid start way into this, and they're really interested in just getting going because either you're facing a crisis and you need to come out of it, or you want to protect yourself from going downhill, biohackerblueprint.com is a great resource. Stephen Taroni and I have put this together, and Stephen is part of the Billion Dollar Body BDB Live. He's going to be at BDB Live. He's part of the Billion Dollar Body group, and
Cool.
there with you. So for any of your viewers that are part of that, you can find our connections there. But biohackerblueprint.com. If you want to just jump in and detox, biohackerdetox.com. You can sign up for our next rotation, which starts on May 13th.
May 13th.
Pre-training for that starts on May 8th, and anybody wants to get going can get their supplements ordered today. You'll still have time to get on board to get that going. And then anybody who's interested in one-to-one with me from a clinical perspective, I see patients every day in my clinic, and axioneuro.com is my website. So that's AXIONEURO.com, and I'm taking patients actively right now. So happy to see folks in person, and then follow virtually if that is good for your lifestyle. So
great.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'll make sure we'll include all of these links in the show notes and the comments, so it's easily accessible for everyone. Incredible. So I think I want to kind of end with sort of a final question, and that's more of a big picture trend that you're seeing perhaps about the neuroeconomy. What's do you find is the most exciting thing about the times that we live in the future that's emerging right now? What is sort of the most exciting thing that we have to look forward to right now?
That is a great question. I mean, there's so many good answers, like, the end of violent wars, and exploding value, and environmental benefit, but I think ultimately the best answer, Miro, is exactly what we're doing right now. And that is that one of the hallmarks of the neuroeconomy is helping other people at a large scale. Mm. So, I think you and your tribe, your group that you're doing that you put together is doing some of the most important work in the history of humanity. And that may sound like a bit of an overstatement, but if you think about it, we're some of the early leaders in making that transition, right? Most of the world is still struggling kind of in that cardio economy mindset and burning out, and haven't even started to get into that gap where they're going to have to make that transition. And a lot of the world is in that gap right now where they're floundering, and it's a confusing place to be. Disorienting, you don't know what's going on. Maybe you've lost your income, you've lost the job that you had before, you're having to redefine yourself. And that's hard for anybody at any age, but especially people over the age of 35 who are having to go through that. It's a confusing time. So what you're doing by creating a tribe of people who are going through it and then coming out on the other side, you're essentially creating that pathway, and you're showing the way. And that is some of the most legitimate and honest and enlightened work that anybody will ever do. The spiritual leaders of the past, Gandhi and the great spiritual leaders of every massive major religion, whether it's Jesus or Krishna or Muhammad, Buddha, they all knew how to help people make massive transitions. Well, we live in a time right now where we can do that at scale by helping so many other people to make this a peaceful, existence, to get through to the other side where they can flourish at an exponential level. So to me, that's what's most exciting, is connecting with people like you who are enlightened and who are helping other people on a massive level. So I just, tip my hat to you and send you, peace and encouragement.
Thank you so much, Sean. I absolutely received that. Incredible. I think I heard you say that this is the most important work in humanity that we're doing right now. And yeah, that sounds like a huge statement, but I also believe that the way you're breaking it down right now is the most important time, and it is the biggest opportunity we have. I've got my One Life t-shirt on, it's the only one that we have right now. And so we have to make it count, and it's an exciting time. Super appreciate you, Sean. I don't know what else to say other than immense gratitude for your work, and I so honor your journey and your willingness to share all of your great knowledge with us. So I hope that anyone watching is inspired to implement some of, just at least one of these strategies that we learned today. And I know I'm going to reach out to Sean directly right after this call to get some more personalized support. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to getting to know you and your tribe better.
Let's do it.
Thanks.
You're a member now, so welcome to the Conscious Entrepreneur community.
Thank you, man.
Talk to you soon.
Yeah,
Thanks, guys.
All right, bye-bye.